Let me first start off by saying it's good to be back. Uh, Saginaw Cares podcast. I'm Pastor Ramon Smith, Senior Pastor at Saginaw United Methodist Church.
And I'm Rhonda Chambers. I am the associate pastor here at Saginaw United Methodist Church, and we're delighted to have our pastor back.
Well, yeah. I just spent a couple weeks in Charlotte, North Carolina for the General Conference. 2020 postponed till 2024. And it is good to be back here in Texas, but there's a lot for us to get into in this podcast about what took place in North Carolina during General Conference.
First off, I think most of us are really confused because we have central conferences, we have Central Texas Conference, we have the General Conference, the Annual Conference, the District Conference.
Wow.
It gets
Yeah, it's a lot.
very confusing. So tell us, what is General Conference?
So General Conference is a worldwide gathering of United Methodists, and it is our only lawmaking body. So think of it as a legislative body, but it's also a worshiping community because we gather there for worship at the beginning of every day. There is music. There are bishops who preach and bring a powerful word from God that inspire us. And we all gather and we sing and we lift up our voices. There are folks, again, from all over the world speaking and singing in their own native tongue. So it's truly a beautiful gathering. Also, there's an election of officers while we're there at General Conference as well. So I think the easy way to think of it is our lawmaking body, and so it's the only one that has the power to make any changes in the Book of Discipline.
So this is like Congress, and we've basically had our Congress in gridlock for the last 50 years.
Something like something like that. Yeah. Everybody that goes, they're elected. And so I was elected back in 2019. Yeah. So
But that's really neat. So, what kind of things actually happened at this general conference?
all right. So the first thing that happened was full communion with our Episcopal brothers and sisters. It's not a merger between us, but it is a recognition of the sacramental authority of each, and also we can share things like clergy, for example. So again, I want to be very clear. We're not merging with our Episcopalian friends, but we are now in full communion with them, like we are with some other denominations as well. So that was the first thing. Next thing is regionalization, which some of you may have heard about, and I know that you know, it's kind of confusing in terms of what it means, but I'll do my very best to provide you guys with a brief overview. So the best way I can do it is through example.
Okay.
First of all, regionalization would allow the church here in the U.S. to have more autonomy over things that are impacting the people here in our context here in the U.S. Right now, basically the church outside of the United States, they're in central conferences. So you got the Central Conference of the Philippines and Central Conference of Africa, same thing in Europe. And they are able to adapt the Book of Discipline to their particular context. They don't need our votes for it. They gather in their central conferences and they vote on it and they can adapt it to their own context. However, when it comes to the US though, everybody has a say in what goes on in the US, right? That's not equitable at all. Let me give you a good example of that. So in places outside the United States, they're able to adapt their Book of Discipline as it relates to something like candidacy. So their elders don't necessarily have to go through the same hoops, right? In terms of their path to ordination, they don't have to meet the same educational requirements because there's no university Senate approved seminaries outside the U.S. as far as I know. And so they can adapt, but yet they get to vote on the educational requirements of our clergy. It doesn't make sense to me. Same thing in terms of our retirement plan. They're in a completely different plan, but yet they get to vote on it. And so, and in fact,
not fair.
it's not fair, but some of our brothers and sisters from abroad have stated, they much rather not that have to come and really deal with a lot of U.S. matters. They would rather deal with things that pertains to the church globally. If we're going to have this global gathering, if that makes sense.
So the worldwide church.
Yeah, yeah, so it won't be so U.S. centric in a way, where there are so there's both sides of that. On one hand, they get say in our matters right now, and then on the other hand, some of them are like, look, I don't want to say in your matters. So,
well, just like we wouldn't get to vote for who's going to be president of Russia or something.
right, that's a great example of that. So regionalization, but it will require constitutional amendment. So that means that I have to go back to the annual conferences, and 2/3 of the annual of all the annual conferences, in terms of the total vote, we would need that in order to make that constitutional amendment.
So we've only proposed that. That hasn't actually, it's passed the general conference,
Right.
but it still has to
Be
be
ratified.
Oh, wow. So we have to have 2/3 votes from all of the
Yeah,
conferences
yeah.
across the whole world.
The whole world, yes.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks
So
for clearing that
we'll
up.
wait and see.
Thanks for clearing that up.
We'll wait and see. The other thing that happened was the removal of restrictive language from the Book of Discipline. So that's basically anything that has to do with human sexuality.
That's the thing that's been all over the news.
That's the thing that's been all over the news. That's where the news is really focused on that. Just a note, the word homosexual did not appear in the Book of Discipline until 1972. All right. So hundreds of years, we didn't have it in there. And as soon as it was placed in there, we've been fighting it ever since. And so all that was done was to remove that language. And what it does is it actually gives more autonomy to the local churches and to the pastors.
So the same thing like regionalization does for the United Methodist churches within the United States. Now we're giving it to the individual congregations and
Right.
individual pastors, and no one can force them to do anything either way.
Right.
I think that would be great news.
Yeah, yeah. So you get to look at your contacts and figure out what's going to be best for your contacts. So pastors get to choose whether or not they want to officiate a wedding for someone who's a member of the LGBTQ community. And so it's up to that individual pastor. So
But they
to
can't
decide.
force that pastor.
They
to
cannot
do that.
force the pastor. So the
So-
pastor has choice. Same thing for the local church in terms of weddings on campus. So the trustees set the facility use policy in the local churches. And so judicial council has ruled that as it relates to the weddings for members of the LGBTQ community, a local church cannot be forced to have those weddings. Now, if they want to, they can. So again, it allows for choice there at the local level. It's not somebody up top telling you what to do.
But the United Methodist Church is still recognizing the definition of a marriage as initially between a man and a woman of consenting age, and they have just added on.
Yeah, they added on some additional language to cover the fact that, yeah, but
primarily,
the definition is still in there where it says between a man and woman, so that's in there, and they've expanded it to account for the fact now that there's going to be some churches that have openly gay pastors and are doing weddings and things like that.
But the church cannot, or the United Methodist Church as a whole, cannot force a congregation to accept a gay pastor or a LGBT pastor or even a woman pastor.
Right, or a minority pastor. Okay, so for those of you who don't know how the appointment making process works, the SPRC in consultation with your district superintendent, who's a member of the cabinet, and the cabinet, along with the bishop, primarily the bishop, they're the ones who make the appointments. Okay, and so DS consults with the local church, and they will ask, okay, are they willing to take a minority? Are they willing to take a woman? And now the new one is going to be, are they willing to take a member of the LGBTQ community to serve as the pastor? The reason being for that is that they don't want to do any harm. They don't want to do any harm to the clergy person, nor do they want to do harm to the local church. And
Good.
so it's very important that they find a good match. So again, it comes down to choice. So there's choice at almost every level. Nobody's forcing anyone to do anything. That's contrary to some of the narratives that have been put out there.
So the news is doing what it always does and peddling fear and
Yeah, 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 yeah,
stirring
yeah,
up
yeah.
stuff that shouldn't be
Yeah,
stirred.
yeah, yeah. And then some of this stuff you see online from unofficial sources and things like that, fear mongering. And so I want to be clear about something though, that our church is open, of course, as it always has been to all people. We want to love on everybody.
Yeah.
Um, and so I hope and pray that we don't allow this to become like this wedge issue that kind of forces us apart. For many years, a lot of people have been here 50, 60, 70 years, and they have sat in pews with people that they don't agree with on every point, right? But they have chosen to love each other and to be united in mission together and to care for one another. And I hope that we will continue to do that.
I hope so too, because this is a beautiful church with a loving
Yeah.
congregation, and we want to maintain that. So I'm hoping that most of them will realize that for the most part of us, nothing is going to
Yeah.
change in the way that we worship, in the way that we deal with each other, and the way we love each other. It's not going to change.
Right. So, for example, prior to the changes that were made at General Conference, I can't recall ever really talking about human sexual orientation from the pulpit. I'm not gonna start. That's like not on my list of things, right?
No, we've got other things that we're
Yeah, we
worried
got.
about.
There's so many other things in the Bible, I tell you. And uh, so that's not what, I'm not gonna start doing that. We're not gonna, I'm not gonna be wearing a rainbow colored stole or anything like that. Although for those who want to wear it, that's cool.
Yes.
But I'm gonna stay consistent to who I've always been. So the pastor that you have known, I'm gonna remain being it. Same thing with you, right?
Yep. Still going to be authentically Rhonda.
We're gonna be who we are.
Hmm.
And so that's basically what took place in General Conference, aside from this one other important thing I was about to forget. It has to do with the budget. So we approved the budget. And so it was a 42% cut in the budget.
42% cut. That's
Yeah, that's the
huge.
lowest it's been now since the 1980s.
Wow.
And so, I mean, there's a lot of programs they got cut that were doing a lot of good. However, the general church was trying to balance the needs of the local congregations versus the need of our connectional system. And so they chose to give churches relief because, a lot of churches were hurting coming through COVID.
Hmm.
And then, this whole thing with some of these disaffiliations and stuff like that. And also just the economic realities of the day with the inflation and things like that. So, as a result, 42% cut in budget. Additionally, as it relates to pastors' pensions, no more. They're
Oh
gone.
no, they're
Yeah,
gone.
yeah. So, again, this is a move to help the local church as well. And so, we're going to move to a defined contribution plan,
Like a 401k.
like a 401k, like most companies offer people today, as opposed to the pension we've had, in the past. So, I mean, for those of us who started out in the pension-based system, and matter of fact, right now it's a hybrid system. Um, when I retire, I'm still entitled to that, which was, in there,
Sure, they
but
can't take that
legally,
away.
yeah. But, from this point forward, it's basically the defined contribution. So, yeah. The other thing is that they cut the number of bishops. So they cut 7 bishops here in the U.S.
Wow.
And so that's going to help in terms of the Episcopal fund. But they sent 2 to Africa because of the growth that's going on there. And they were actually promised 5 in 2016. And so, you know, everybody's having to make a sacrifice there at the general church so that the local church can get some relief and so our local churches can become healthier.
That's great. That and it helps us with our apportionments too.
right, they should come down because the base rate was cut. And so it goes from 3.29% down to 2.6. So going from 3.29 to 2.6 in the first 2 years. So that's 25, 26. And if collection rates move up above 90% or more, then that percentage will bump up to 2.9%, just to try to fund some of those ministries that were cut.
And I think that's a great opportunity for our church as well, because then we can use these same monies and things that are donated to help out here in our local communities and create more mission opportunities.
Exactly. And that's it. That's the idea.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. So put more money in the local church so then we can go and do the work that God has called us to do.
I think that this should be great news for the local
It is great
congregation.
news. So if you think about it as a whole, take everything I just said with a whole, local churches have greater autonomy today in making decisions and they, as it relates to human sexuality and all those things. So greater autonomy on that. Nobody's forcing anybody to do anything.
Amen.
It's choice. They're at the
Yes.
local level. Okay. And more the cut in apportionments means that there is more money kept. I should say it that way. Kept
Kept
in the
in the
local
local
church
church.
instead of putting in the local church. Kept in the local church.
Yes.
So that we can be about doing our mission locally.
And we can still start focusing on all the things that we care about most, like championing children and making disciples and telling
Yeah,
our story and caring
exactly.
for people the way that we love to do here at Saginaw United
Yeah,
Methodist Church.
because Saginaw cares.
Yes, it does.
All right. So, so those are my biggest takeaways from General Conference. I can't express to you how powerful the moments of worship were. And it was truly a blessing to be able to, and a humbling experience to be there. Right at the same time, I'm tired. So, but yeah,
Y'all had a lot of different proposals and things that were coming
yeah,
through.
over a
This was
thousand
not,
petitions. Yeah.
that's a
And we were
lot.
broken down to legislative committees and subcommittees. And
But
so
everything had an equal opportunity to be heard and
everything got
discussed.
looked at. Yeah. So everything got looked at in subcommittee, right?
Mhm.
And so, so it's
So nothing was sneaking in under the table or
no,
that's good.
it,
There was no pork in any of these
no.
legislative things
So,
in there.
how it works is this way. So, once it moves out of subcommittee and it goes to the full committee, like I was in ordained ministry committee, then it's debated again. It gets to make debated there. It's recorded what the vote is once the vote is called for, right? If there is nine or fewer votes against, then it goes on the consent calendar, which that's a list of things that get voted on as a whole. If it's 10 or more, then it ends up having to be debated there on the floor. However, if something dies in committee or if something doesn't meet that 10 vote against threshold, if you can find 20 people to sign a petition, you can then get that taken off the consent calendar if it's something that passed. Or if it was something that did not make it to the floor and you wanted to make it to the floor, you can also, it's a 24-hour period where you can then have that raised on the floor. So even if it's something that wasn't popular in committee, there's a process by which you can get it on the floor.
Well, but there were hundreds and hundreds of delegates, so 20 people is nothing. You
Right.
could have easily found 20 people if you needed something to be
Yeah.
further discussed.
So we just want to make that clear.
All right. Well, I think that's great. So this is even more efficient than maybe the United States legal
Man, it's tiring.
legislative system.
Yeah. All right. So
That's great though. But for the most part, people here in the pews here in our Saginaw United Methodist Church, this is great news and nothing really is going to change for them. So what it means for them is we can continue to serve and to bless more people here in our community.
amen. That's exactly what it means. Well, it's been fun talking to you about General Conference, and uh, I am like excited about what's next for our church, focusing on developing our vision, focus on carrying out our mission
Yes.
of making disciples for the transformation of the world,
And working together in a positive
and
way to
working
move
together in a
forward.
positive way to move forward.
Amen.
All right, this has been Saginaw Cares. God bless you. Look forward to seeing you and the next time.